Isn't that right? 24:15 through 25:30. We had just finished this section, chapter 24, verses 4 through 14, his answer to question number 3 regarding the end of the age. And now, number 3, his answer to question number 2. His answer to question number 2 with reference to the sign of his coming and his coming. And in parentheses, I've indicated this, primarily concerning the Jew. Primarily concerning the Jew. Now then, I think that this section progresses in a threefold manner. And let's see what you got. Prophecy concerning the signs. Sign of the tribulation, signs of the second advent, significant parables are being prepared. Very good, very good. Well, here's what I've got. Chapter 24, verses 15 through 28, the surety of his coming. Verses 29 through 31, signs of his coming. 24:32 through 25:30, secrecy of his coming. So in answer to this second question, tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming. Question number 2, the end of the age. Well, we've already dealt with number 3. Now the second question, what is the sign of thy coming? And emphasizes, I think more than just the sign, but emphasizes the fact of his coming. Now chapter 24, verses 15 through 28, the surety of his coming. And you got the fetish of abomination. All right. You're going to use F's here. Okay. The fetish of abomination, the flight of the Jews, the fateful great tribulation, the false prophets of Christ, the fabulous coming. All right. All right. Now then, I have, as far as my fivefold division concerning the surety of his coming, the desolation, verse 15, the distress in verses 16 through 20, destruction, verses 21 through 22, deception in verses 23 through 26, and the definiteness of it, 27 through 28. All right. Now then, let's go just a little bit slower with reference to this section. We'll still be able to finish before the time is up. But in verse 15, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. So he speaks of the abomination of desolation, that this is certainly one of the signs concerning his coming, because then he gives some other aspects of these signs just a little bit later. But now, in light of this abomination of desolation, is referred to, I believe, in 2 places in the book of Daniel. Daniel 9:27 and Daniel 12:11. Now, couple with this 2 Thessalonians 2:4 and Revelation chapter 13. Now in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, we have the indication that the day of the Lord will not come until there first come the apostasy and the man of sin be revealed, who shall do a number of things. Now, one of the things that's mentioned of here is the matter that he's going to sit in the temple, holy place, showing himself that he is God and is worshipped as God. Now, if you want to turn there, there's, again, a number of things that I want to really emphasize there. You don't have your Greek New Testament with you, do you? Okay, now then, notice what verse 3 says. Except the apostasy first come, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now then, this is a warning not to be disturbed that the day of the Lord has come, right? That's the context. Context emphasizes that these believers, even though they're in a great deal of stress and trial and undergoing persecution and all this, that they're not in the day of the Lord because certain things have to take place first. And that is, the apostasy first come, and the son of, actually, this is Ananias, the son of lawlessness. The son of lawlessness be revealed. The son of destruction. Now, please observe. There are two things mentioned with reference to who the Antichrist is. He is a man of lawlessness, and he is a man of destruction. Now then, following who he is, now I'm introduced to what he does. Now we emphasized this once before, but these are restrictive participles. That which follows, they're all participles. Restrictive participles. What it does not say, and this is where our mid-trib raptures are all off the base. They have misconstrued the one who opposes and the one who exalts himself all that is called God, or is worship, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. What they misconstrue is that the one who exalts, or the one who opposes and exalts himself, all is called God, so that he sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. They misconstrue that is associated with the revelation of the son of lawlessness. It doesn't say that at all. It says apostasy must first come, and this person, known as the man of lawlessness and the son of perdition, he's revealed. Now then, I have restrictive participles that tells us his conduct, but it does not say that that's his conduct when he's revealed. You see that? They're restrictive participles, and absolutely, you cannot prove by grammar that this is conduct that takes place when he's revealed. Absolutely not. And another thing that supports this is that the restrainer is still here. The restrainer is still here. He's got to be removed. And then the third thing, which emphatically declares that the day of the Lord hasn't come, is that we don't know who the man of sin is, do we? He's revealed. He has to be revealed. So, for these folks that hold to the mid-tribulation view and get their support from this passage, they are just simply not aware of what this passage has said. Because it's talking about not the great day of the Lord, but it's talking about the day of the Lord. Now then, in this passage in 2 Thessalonians 2, I do have reference to what the abomination of desolation is. And that is, he's sitting in the temple of God showing himself that he is God. Now that will take place in the middle of tribulation. But it does not say that that is revealed as such when the man of sin is revealed. You following? Or you have to be careful about that, because the mid-tribs, they misconstrue that. All right, now number 2, verses 16 through 20, you have, it is a time of great distress. The surety of his coming give to us the fact that there will be great, great distress before he comes. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of the house. Neither let him which is in the field turn back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. He's just bringing to the fore a great number of difficulties that will confront primarily the Jew when he returns. Now, you might take down as a cross-reference to this Revelation chapter 12, verse 13 through 16, because here is a reference to the time when the Jew is going to have to flee, and the earth opens its mouth, and they are taken to a place for protection for a time, times and a half a time. Now then, in verses 21 through 22, it's a time of great destruction. When there is this taking place, then you know that the time is near. All right, verse 21 and 22. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the earth, yea, to this time no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Now, in this connection, take down Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7, Daniel 12:1, Joel 2:2. Now, this great time of destruction, I don't know how people can feel as though that some of this is already taking place, because my Bible tells me there's going to be such destruction that it hasn't been known since the beginning of the earth. Now, you stop to think of the awful things that have taken place in history and the awful things that have taken place right now. And there is going to be more stress and more trial than ever before. Well, it's a horrible time. It's an unthinkable time in that last half of the tribulation time. Just unthinkable. Now, what do you understand verse 22 to mean?
Well, just that the extent of it is so great, but at the end, tribulation saints, there's still some that will trust it, and shall be certain. I think it won't go beyond the 7 years. That's been told to be If it did, then none would survive. If it was something greater.
Some teach that this passage relates to the fact that there is going to be a shortening of the days.
When 20-hour days or something?
Yeah. The day is going to be shortened. And others teach that the days of the tribulation are going to be shortened.
What, in less than 7 years?
That's the implication. But really, they miss the point in both. Except those days be cut off. It's the Greek word for docking a sheep's tail. Except those days be docked. There should no flesh be saved. In other words, if the days of tribulation of that great horrible time, if they didn't come to the end, if they weren't cut off, that no one would be saved. See that? But for the elect's sake, those days will be cut off. Those days will stop. And they'll stop at the end of the 7 years. If it went beyond the 7 years, so horrible, that no one would be left alive. No one. But for the sake of the elect. Now then, in verses 23 through 26, it's time of great deception. Verse 23, Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. And I just have, with reference to verse 23, you might take down 1 John 2:18. And then verse 24, For there shall arise false Christs, false prophets, and shall so show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Take down 2 Peter 2:1 and Revelation 13, verse 13 through 15. So in verses 23 through 26, it's a time of deception like you'd never known. Why is this the case? In the middle of the week, Satan is to be cast out. Revelation chapter 12. He's to be cast out. The false prophet, the beast and the false prophet, they have been endowed with power from Satan. Satan gives the Antichrist his authority, his power. And then I'm told the false prophet exercises all of the prerogative of the Antichrist. So it is just a horrible time. And when I have indicated for me that this is true for the tribulation time, the last half of the tribulation time, and I see that it's for the purpose of the deception, contrary to Scripture, but revealed by Scripture that this should be true. Now, if those who are engaged in signs and miracles today of the charismatics, you tell me by what power and by what spirit they're being manifested. I have perfectly good scriptural support to indicate that miracles and signs and so forth are of the devil in light of Revelation. Now, I used to take a little bit of offense at Dr. Chafer and also Dr. Unger when they just flat, blatantly, without a great deal of explanation, said it's of the devil. But when you know Matthew chapter 7, when you know Revelation chapter 13, and you know that those things take place in the tribulation time also, and by what power they take place in the tribulation time, and you know that today the sign gifts have passed off the scene, and you still have these things, don't you see the normal logic? They're the devil. And I believe that's true. Absolutely so. When you minister contrary to the Word of God, so-called spiritual ministry, what spirit? What spirit? My Bible tells me from the lips of the Lord Jesus Christ in the Gospel of John that He'll lead you unto all truth. All right? That's your life. Well, it's rather interesting, and I just believe that we can come with. I don't know whether you want to follow that kind of logic, that kind of dogmatism at this point or not, but the more I see of this shenanigan stuff, the more I'm willing to be very, very dogmatic in this regard. All right, now then, number 5, verse 27 and 28, and I've got this just indicated as definiteness. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even in the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. And of course you know this, that is a reference back to Revelation 19, the great supper of God. So you can be very, that might be good to just get those specific verses. 17 through 18. So you can just take an illustration from nature as he's given it there. The lightning cometh out and shineth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. When lightning is playing around, dancing in the skies, where it goes clear across the heavenlies, doesn't it? So you can rest just as assured on the coming of the Son of Man as you see those things are definite in nature. Now then, in chapter 24, verses 29 through 31, you have the sign of his coming. And I think we'll stop right there, Wes. The sign of his coming.
Talk about Revelation 18, you have the great supper of God.
Uh-huh.
And just before you talking about the marriage of the Lamb, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also Jesus gives a parable about the feast, and he calls guest one, says, no, I'm doing this, another does this, right? And so he says, fine, and he pronounced judgment or something, and he says, well, go and get other guests, right? And then he finds within the midst the one without the wedding garments, casts him out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you tie that in with the second advent?
Well, I don't know, Wes. There's a big discussion whether the marriage supper of the Lamb is in heaven or whether the marriage supper of the Lamb is on earth. Now, I have kind of felt as though, now, I don't think this refers to the marriage supper of the Lamb.
With
The great destruction.
Right.
I don't think that is, because that's judgment. This is that's a time of blessing. All right, we're ready for 3B in our outline, the sign of his coming, chapter 24, verse 29 through 31. I think that we ought to bring something out rather emphatically here in just a moment. Let me read verses 29 through 31. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. And you'll remember that the question was, and what shall be the sign of thy coming? The sign of thy coming. Now, in this little conference that I attended, I heard a brother who's I thought was very fine. And he spoke from the book of the Revelation. And he pointed out that this was a book of signs. Now, this is the general approach to the book of the Revelation. And it's also a general accepted thought with reference to signs, that signs are simply illustrations, I guess, what you want to call them, connected also with miracles. But I think Dr. Johnson is absolutely right when you come to some around, that a sign is some kind of a presentation that verifies a literal truth. Now notice, if you will, verse 30. Then shall appear. They ask, what is the sign of your coming? Now, they didn't ask what he was going to come or not. What's going to be the sign of your coming? In other words, what's going to be that which will point to your coming? Now, as far as I see it here, especially in this verse 30, that you have what we may call a sign, but it is that which is associated with a reality, isn't it? And when it says, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Well, what is the sign of the Son of Man in heaven? Well, it's the coming of the Son of Man in heaven, isn't it? And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. I don't know whether I'm getting the point across or not, but I want to emphasize the fact that signs are just not signs to see or events. As far as I'm concerned, the signs that you're going to find in the book of the Revelation are illustrations of literal truths. You take the horses. Well, now, it's a sure sense that the white horse and the pale horse and the green horse and such as that is not the fact that we're going to see a little horse coming. But what a horse represents. A horse represents triumph. That's what the generals used in that white horse. Even in World War II, when World War II ended, there was quite a fuss among the Russian generals who was to ride the white horse through the Red Square. Well, what did that white horse represent? that white horse represented. Here was victory, isn't that right? And the general that was chosen, who it was, he was riding the victorious horse. And I don't like just the idea of things representing just being signs, like the sign of tongues and all of that. I just don't like that. I think these signs are to represent literal truths. And granted, they may not be the truth itself, but certainly this is. You see the sign of Son of Man? What is it? Then shall all people see the Son of Man coming. So, what we have already given by way of the surety of His coming in verses 15 through 28, they're events, isn't that right? They're events which indicate the certainty of the Lord's coming. Now then, when you come to verse 29 through 31, I don't see a great deal of change, except you do have the term sign there, and that's a reason we've suggested possibly a different division here, and suggested it being the sign of His coming. But there are definite events. For instance, in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Well, what is this? If you want a sign, it's going to be signed by the heavenly elements. And you might take these references down. Revelation chapter 6, verse 12 and 13. Revelation 8:12. Revelation 16:18. There are great heavenly disturbances. They are real things. They are real events. They are real activities which immediately precede the second advent of the Lord. And then verse 30, the sign of His coming, I've got it entitled, by heaven's descending Son of Man. Now I've got a few references here that you might take down. Revelation 1:7. And then I've indicated that this is earthly, visible, coming of the Lord in His second advent to show His great power and His great glory. Now there is another reference that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of the Father. And of course that's Philippians 2:10 and 11. Now then in verse 31, with reference to the sign of His coming, by heaven's angelic messengers. Notice the activity with reference to the events which indicate the second coming of the Lord. And He shall send His angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together His elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Well, if you want some activity concerning the gathering of His elect, take down Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 33 through 38. And then that tremendous passage in Ezekiel 39:28, where we find that not a single Jew is going to be left, but they're going to be purged, you see. And then in Romans chapter 11, verse 26 through 27. And all Israel shall be saved. So if I were to suggest for you that we have a passage specifically relating to the sign of His coming, it would be these few verses, verses 29 through 31. But they're not just signs, they're actual events which take place. And Dr. Johnson also gave us I believe, a proper reference in the Gospel of John to indicate what signs were in chapter 20. And many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. And of course, that deals with the miracles. But what's the purpose of miracles? But these are written, these particular miracles, these particular signs, and they were actual events of supernatural things, but these are written that you might believe that Jesus is Christ, the Son of God. So the purpose for it was that there might be faith in him. All right, now in chapter 24, verses 32 through 25:30. The next division I've got here is entitled The Secrecy of His Coming. First the surety, signs, and now the secrecy. Now, a lot of these divisions just simply overlap, don't they, with reference to emphasis in light of material given. But if we want a classification which seems, I think, to give a prominent emphasis, this section here now is going to emphasize the secrecy of his coming. Now this is done by a series of parables and illustrations. That's what I've got in my notes, that this is done by the presentation of a series of parables and illustrations. And what you have in this section is not only illustration, but also parables and vice versa. Now then, I have a threefold division as far as this section is concerned.
I don't think I have this page.
You don't? Capital C, 3? Well, I'll just have to give it to you then. I'll take it down in notes, I guess. Put it on the other side, because I don't have any of those. I don't have any of those forms over here with me.
It goes. You got 4A, B, or whatever.
25, 31 through 33.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you're missing a page then. Capital C. So just turn your page over there. Capital C. Capital C3 continued. Chapter 24, verse 32 through 25:30. Now 1 in parenthesis. That'd be dealing right with the bottom of your page there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see we got 3A, B, C before, or is that a different?
Okay, now this is C3C.
Oh, 3C, 3.
Okay, now 1 in parenthesis. Parables that give us the time in general. And along with that, make it parables and illustrations, because there's some things here which are not parables but are illustrations of the time in general. Now, as you read this section, for instance, let me just point this out. In verse 42, watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. Verse 44, therefore be ye also ready, for in such hour ye think not the Son of Man. In verse 36, I missed one that I wanted to give you. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Now I remember a number of years ago how I got caught in prayer meeting one night, that I was emphasizing the second advent of Christ being a secret time. No one knew when it was to take place. And one of the fellas began to needle me. He was one that was always trying to catch me anyway, you know. And he caught me this time. He said, well, if the tribulation is 7 years long, why, that's no secret when he's going to come. He's going to come at the end of the 7 years. Isn't that right? Well, what would you say to that?
Well, they consider like also the reference about being a thief in the night.
Yeah.
Well, it's not talking about time so much, but the people aren't prepared for his coming.
All right, that's true too, but the time period, see.
Well, that too, you don't know exactly when he's coming because you don't know the day or the hour. Especially, it depends for people to do this too, but I can see the part in it where it doesn't matter where you are. What time does he come? Greenwich Mean Time, or
Well,
his coming could be at any time. I've also heard that he comes. One view was when he comes for 24 hours. I don't know about that.
All right.
But still, the day you don't know exactly. One part of the earth it's one day, another part of the earth it's another day.
Now, we know the year.
Yeah.
We know the year. But he doesn't say year here. He says, but of that day and hour. We don't know the day, no, we don't know that. We know the year. But we don't know the day nor the hour. Now, there's your answer. And it's one that you can so easily bypass when you get a question that is a question to needle you. Say, Bible says 7-year tribulation period. What do you mean you don't know the hour? And so it wasn't the fact that he was trying to so much dispute the Bible as it was trying to discredit me. Because you get those wags all over, everywhere, you know. And you're right with reference to the nature and the character and so forth, lack of preparation. Now, I just got here, underneath this first heading, parables and illustrations showing time in general. The event is sure, but the hour and day is secret. So, it is. The event is sure. But now then, he gives you the time in general with reference to showing the certainty of his coming. First of all, in verses 32 through 36, 32 through 36, that's a little a in parentheses, he gives you a parable from nature. And I want to emphasize something at this point. Keep in mind the thought of the passage, rather than trying to take from a passage truth that verifies a similar truth somewhere else, like J. Sidlow Baxter does. J. Sidlow Baxter confuses Matthew 24 with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And he argues from the standpoint of similarity that this passage relates to the rapture of the church. Now, Dr. DeHaan also used Matthew 24 as relating to the rapture of the church, showing a secret rapture and so forth like that. Well, Matthew 24, the church isn't in view. And here he's just giving a parable, and don't take a fig tree too far either. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye. When ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. Well, what are all of these things referring to? Previous context, isn't that right? From verse 15 on. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things shall be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Okay, now if there's anything that he's teaching here, he's teaching is a time that no one knows, with reference to the hour and the day. He said, now then, when these signs, or when these things and these events that you see in the previous context become a reality, then you know that his time is near. Okay, when it refers to this generation shall not pass away, well, what does this generation refer to? Not the generation to which he's speaking to right there, but this generation that sees these things. Keep it in context. Keep it in context. The generation that sees these things shall not pass away. So you have here the parable of nature that indicates not only the fact of the surety of his coming, but also that it is a secret time and known only to the Father. And uses that simple illustration. Look out here now at where we are at this time of the year. Why, look at the snow melting, and why, we saw beautiful, beautiful green carpeted fields down in Kansas and Missouri, and the cattle out grazing. And then the further we came, we saw the green beginning to diminish. And then further up into Michigan, just a little bit of green along the highway. And then as you came further, snow. In little patches of snow, little patches. And now when we got here, got lots of snow, but we also see bare ground. Well, what does that indicate to us?
Well, summer's coming.
Spring is right on us, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. So that's what he's doing here, with reference to the events that he's talked about. All right, now then, in verses 37 through 39, he takes an illustration from history. That's biblical. This is not a parable. So here's an illustration from history, which is biblical history, 37 through 39. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Whereas in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, what's the emphasis here? He is simply showing that as the condition was true in the days of Noah, so shall be the condition that's going to take place prior to the coming of the Lord. And that is not difficult. That's just evident right here, verse 37 through 39. Now then, in verses 40 through 42, you have an illustration taken from agriculture. Then shall two be in a field. One shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding the mill. The one shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. So he turns attention to the matter of the people working in the fields and what's going to take place. Right? It's going to be a time that's... what are you going to do?
Oh.
It is a time that is showing a very dividing aspect. Those who are prepared and those who are not prepared. Eh? Okay. Now then, in verses 43 through 44, you have I think this is a parable of an actual event of a household. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Well, that's just plain illustration of a fact, isn't it? And he's using it to illustrate the secrecy of his coming. If the owner had known what time the thief was going to come, he'd be sitting there with a shotgun, wouldn't he? So he wouldn't break in. But he doesn't know. Same as you and I do not know the exact hour and day of his coming. Now then, in verses 45 through 51, he gives an illustration with reference to servants and service. The wise servants and those that are not wise. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and to drink and with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, in an hour that he is not aware of. Then shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so it's just another illustration that of contrast between those who are prepared and those who are not prepared, and the fact that when he does come, the righteous will have blessing, the unrighteous will have judgment. Now then, number 2 in parentheses. Parable of reality, of true possession. Chapter 25, verse 1 through 13. Now, I'm not going to go on with that one because I want to wait until I can do chapter 25 together. Sorry with you, because I think we can get the idea better if we couple all of 25, at least down through verse 30. Okay? Because there are two parables that I believe that are definitely misunderstood concerning this portion of Matthew. All right, now we are continuing in this section that you don't have an outline form for, do you? And that is in chapter 25 now, 25, and we'll get down through verse 30 today, I hope. Now, we have looked at some very interesting things by way of the answer to this second question concerning the Lord's coming, the sign of the coming, and of course, as you know, there's dovetailed with it the sign of his coming, as well as the end of the age. But primarily, it is answer to the sign of his coming with reference to the Jews. And we've had instruction, and then we've had some parables. But now in chapter 25, the Lord sets forth this truth once again in 2 major parables that are given extended portions of Scripture concerning its truth. Now, let me just ask you a question concerning these 2 parables as you've read and you've looked at it, tried to outline and so forth. Could you tell me what these 2 parables emphasize by way of specific truth? The parable of the 10 virgins and the parable of the talents. Could you tell me?
It's been a while since I outlined it.
And you don't have an outline sheet for it. That's the reason you're taking it down on another sheet of paper.
just wonder what I called it generally. I'll just okay, it's in the context of his coming.
Yeah.
Judgment.
Two parables. And it's still in the context with reference to the answer concerning primarily for the Jew, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I always took it, the main thing on the surface was just showing being prepared for his coming.
All right. Now then, prepared for his coming in what two ways?
One is, sure. One is to be ready and watching, I guess. The other is in stewardship.
All right, that's not bad. Now, you stop to think about it. In this parable with reference to the virgins, there are two sets of virgins set in contrast. What is the contrast?
Wise and foolish.
Okay. Why are they called wise and why are they called foolish?
Well, the wise ones, they prepared ahead for his coming. They had extra oil, didn't they?
Not extra oil, but...
Or they filled their lamps.
Mm-hmm. And what about the foolish?
They didn't take any oil with them. All
right, the contrast then, the contrast between the wise virgins and the foolish virgins rests with reference to possession, isn't it? Now, if you could just remember that, you would be well set concerning the parable of the virgins, because you have a contrast with reference to those that have the possession and those that don't have the possession. But both of them are professing the way for his coming, isn't that right? Now then, what about the parable of the talents? What do you have in contrast here?
Just the giving of talents, like each one is given a stewardship to whatever it is, whatever amount, and then later comes the reckoning, the accounting for.
All right, now then, it's another P. If the parable of the virgins relates to possession, what are the parable of the talents?
Provision?
Not provision, but practice, isn't that right? Practice. See, there was a provision given, wasn't there? But how did they react to that? What did they do? What was their practice? Now, I think here are two good headings for these parables. Now, this would be two in parentheses as far as your outline is concerned. The parable of reality of true possession. Now then, number 3 in parentheses, the parable of reality of true practice.
You have points in between it?
Yeah, there are points in between it, to be sure. So we'll give those to you. What do you want? You have cookies. Grandma, here's another candidate for a cookie. Do you have one cookie left? Grandma isn't around. You'll have to wait. Grandpa's having a class. Out you go. All right. Chapter 25, verse 1 through 13, the parable of reality of true possession. Now, there are 4 points, A, B, C. No, I'm sorry, 3 points, A, B, and C. Now, in verses 1 through 4, you have, I believe, that which indicates absence. An absence from the standpoint of the bridegroom isn't there. He's gone. Let me read it. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which shall take their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps, and took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Okay. The bridegroom isn't there. First is the absence of the bridegroom. They are in waiting. Secondly, there's the absence of oil. The wise had oil. The foolish lacked oil. Okay, now that's the scene. All 10 of them are together. All 10 are professing to wait for the bridegroom. Now then, in verses 5 through 9, this is B in your outline, you have the announcement. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. And all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said unto the wise, Give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. But the wise answered, saying, Not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go ye rather to them that sell, and buy for yourselves. Okay, the wise, when the announcement was made, they had a true possession. Now, as far as the foolish was concerned, they lacked the possession. The thing which gets me in this whole thing is that oil was available. The wise had made their purchase, isn't that right? The foolish had neglected. Therefore, by virtue of application, that which would enable one to meet the bridegroom was available. It was available. For Israel, the possession of the true spiritual reality was made available. Some will be ready to meet the Lord in His coming, others will not. But it isn't the fault of the fact that the provision wasn't made. 5 appropriated a provision. 5 failed to appropriate the provision. Does that principle still work for us today? It sure does. Now, this parable has been used very extensively with reference to the present age in which we live. I don't mind its usage by application, but I certainly do oppose the usage with reference to a wrong dispensation. This is talking about the coming of the Lord. Coming of the Lord back for Israel. Now then, in verses 10 through 13, you have the arrival. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage. The door was shut. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, I know ye not. Watch therefore, for you know not neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. And there's the key, isn't it? Talking about the advent of the Son of Man, what's going to be the sign of your coming. See? What's going to be. All right? The parable relates to the second advent of Christ, coming of the Son of Man, and upon his arrival, the wise were prepared, they were ready, and they entered into the blessing. Now then, the foolish they lacked the possession, and they were left out of the blessing of the presence of the Son of God, Son of Man. Very simple. As far as Israel is concerned, there will be those that have availed themselves of the great witness of the 144,000, as well as the others who will be witnessing. But then there will be others in Israel, the rebels, in light of Ezekiel chapter 20. The rebels will be purged out. Why? They didn't have the true possession. Period. Now then, chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. This is 3 in your outline. In parenthesis, parable of reality, of true practice. Both parables deal with reality. One in light of a true possession, and the other in light of a true practice. Now then, I've got 3 points here, but 3 subpoints under the last one. Okay. A in parentheses, verses 14 through 15, the provision. The provision. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Now, out in the side of your paper, I'd like for you to put down some references as far as application. Application only. Application. And notice, if you will, Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Now this is application with reference to the bestowal of gifts by the Lord to the believers, unto every one of us. Now you see in the parable in Matthew 25, I am told he called his servants, all of his servants, apparently by virtue of the parable, are the 3 servants. He called them all. He didn't leave any of them out. He called them all. The same way for the church. But in every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Wherefore, he said, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now this application is going to break down, because these gifts are simply for the believers. But I want you to see that the gifts are given according to the measure of the gift of Christ. See, he's the one that sovereignly bestows, right? Now then, turn with me to 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 4. Verses 10 and 11. As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth. that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Now you see, in this church age, and let it, as we can take the application from Matthew 25, He has given according to His sovereign will, according to our ability we're to serve, right? That ability is God-given too. See that? Now you and I don't have the same ability. You and I do not necessarily have the same gifts. But we are to minister according to that ability, according to the gifts that He's given us, and it's the measure that He's bestowed upon us. See that? I just love it. And when I minister, and when you minister, according to that measure of bestowal, what's the rewards, love? You bet your life. And it isn't the old numbers game. It is. Now, just the other evening, I was asked, "Oh, how many's coming? How many's coming?" Once again, the standard is always among our ministries numbers, right? Numbers. I'll tell you for sure. Just in the passage that we're translating in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, it's quality. It's quality. Because the Lord knows the reasonings of their hearts, that they are foolish, that they are vain, mataios, and that is their aim. Consequence is of no value. No value. And boy, oh boy, quality. Now, in contrast to that, 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know, your fatiguing toil is not kenos, not vain in the Lord. And kenos is quality. And the judgment seat of Christ, your works and my works, are going to be judged according to what sort? The quality. Man, it's great. And this parable lends itself to some wonderful applications, but you can't take it all away. And see that every application is going to fall down someplace. They can destroy your application by shooting holes in its weakness. All right. The problem is that they've just proved that they have rejected what you tried to give them. Well, I'm getting kind of fed up with the shooting holes. All right, provision based on ability, verses 14 through 15. All right, now then, verses 16 through 18, you have the practice of the provision. Now notice this. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained 2 more. But he that received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. In other words, he wasn't a steward for gain. Now then, it says here, I got it in my notes here, 2 had gain, 1 had no gain. And notice where he hid. He hid it in the ground. He hid it in the earth. He hid it in the world. Now then, see in your outline, verses 19 through 30. Here's the prospect. The prospect relates to his return. He is coming back. He is coming back. Yes. Of course, the prospect guarantees his sure return. And now there's 3 points that I have by virtue of this prospect. Little 1, verses 19 through 21, you have the accounting with reference to the one who is given 5 talents. And so he that received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. I guess I failed to read verse 19, didn't I? After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and reckoned with them. Now verse 21, his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. All right, now then, as I'm told here in these verses, that the Lord, when he returned, the one that had served according to the provision, the grace of his master, there wasn't any shame. He came to him and presented the results of his service. And here is reward. Reward is what? He's going to be made ruler. He has commendation. And he said, enter in to the joy of thy Lord. I have had just a real blessing of heart. To think what a service for the Lord means, according to your ability and according to the provision he's given you to minister there. Just think of entering in not to your joy, but to the joy of the Lord. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So I know how to please God, a walk of faith, and I know how to make the Lord happy. A walk of faith with my Father, a walk of devotion and service according to the ability that he's given me. I'm not interested in trying to imitate someone else's gifts. I used to. Man, I remember when Billy Graham started out. I was in college. Well, you never saw, never heard so many little Billy Grahams around that campus in all your life. They were imitating him and trying to use the same gestures, and I will tell you, we had a lot of Billy Grahams. Now, it's such a disgrace what that man is doing now. Just such a disgrace. Just such a disgrace. Well, anyway, number 2 in verses 22 through 23. Here you have an accounting of the one with 2 talents. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Verse 23 gives you the reward, isn't that right? And what's the reward? Same as number 5. Same as number 5. Yeah, same as number 5. Isn't that great? Now in verses 24 through 30,